Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today to learn a bit more about the services that Progress offers. And we're seeing a lot of people are already joining, but let's give another minute or two and allow a few more people to join, and then we'll be ready to start. Okay, I think we are good to start. Again, I would like to welcome everyone and thank you from taking a little bit of your time today to learn more about the different services that Progress offers to its clients. We want to spend some time on giving you some more in-depth information on the various services that we can provide, and more specifically on modernization and staff augmentation. So if you need to outsource part of your development to us, we've come to learn that not all of our clients are aware that this resource is available to them. So we figured it would be valuable for you to learn more about the value that this can provide you in expanding your team's expertise and resources, regardless of what you're dealing with in your project. And I'm actually joined by Sean today, who's joining us on behalf of Resolute Software. They're one of our most trusted service partners. And we felt that it will be more valuable if you're not just hearing about the theory of what the services are, but to also hear about actual projects that we've worked on. So what are the issues that clients usually come to us with and how we've managed to resolve those. Let's move on quickly to the, just a second, to the agenda. What you hear about today is, first of all, an overview of the different services that we offer. So we'll tell you more about what scenarios each of them is most suitable for. And Sean will be giving you examples in between to make it more relatable, so you can see if you're dealing with a similar situation in your current project, whether a particular service might be able to bring you value. With that, then we'll tell you more about the different phases that a services project usually goes through. So what happens after you reach out to us to talk about your project? We've come to understand that people are not very familiar with that and maybe expect us to start in a matter of a couple of days. It usually takes a bit longer, so it's good for you to know that it takes a bit of planning, and maybe you need to allow a couple of weeks to go through the different phases to make sure that we have a good understanding of your requirements and are able to come to a solution that's going to be valuable for both sides. After that, I'll tell you briefly about the tools that we use to provide you control and transparency during the actual delivery of the project. So we want to make sure that you're in control and aware at all times on what work is being delivered for your project, because obviously it matters. You're hiring our experts to bring value to you, and we want to make sure that whatever they do is aligned with your expectations. Also, we've prepared a couple of questions that we'll put in between the slides as a poll, because we want to learn a little bit about the situation that you're in, about the struggles that you have or are dealing with at the moment, because we're always trying to focus our time and efforts in those areas or services that would bring you the most value. So you see those come up in between the slides. And at the end, we've left some time for Q&A. So any questions that you may come up with, regardless if that's related to a particular service that we're talking about, or maybe if you want to ask us about a challenge that you're facing in your current development, make sure to put that in the chat. We're monitoring the chat, and we'll most probably be able to answer that there, but we'll have time at the end to go over as many questions as we can. Obviously, if your question requires a more in-depth discussion, we'll reach out to you after the webinar, and we'll set up a separate conversation with the technical team to discuss that in more details. Okay, let's start with a quick introduction, actually, of me and Sean, who will be co-presenting with me today during the webinar. So my name is Simona, and I have about almost 15 years of experience, actually, in the IT industry. I've been in multiple sales and partner management roles, and was actually part of the Sitefinity team back in the Telerik days. So between 2010 and 2015, I was managing the Sitefinity partner network for EMEA. And I've just recently, last summer, joined Progress again in a new role. So now, as managing the professional services projects, I'm more focused on making sure that our clients have well optimized and successful projects regardless of the issues that they're stumbling upon. And Sean has a few years of experience at Progress as well, actually, but I'll let him share with you more on that. So, Sean.
Thanks, Simona, and thank you everyone for joining us today. We've got quite a crowd, and hopefully you find this information interesting and relevant. Just a little about myself. I've been in the Progress community since 1997. Originally worked for a company called BravePoint, which was a large professional services company, mainly focused, and 95% of our business came from the Progress community. I worked there for 17 years, and we were acquired by Progress in 2014, at which point I worked for the services, ran service sales for some time in North America, then globally. And now I am working for a company who has strong ties to Progress. So, the relationship continues. And what I will say about the Progress ecosystem is they've always been fantastic by, in using partners ever since the beginning, and probably better than any other company I've ever seen as far as the utilization of partners. So I'm happy to be back on the boat, and I'll kick it back to you, Simona.
Wonderful. Great. Thanks for that, Sean. And again, I want to thank you for taking the time today to join me in co-presenting the webinar. I really feel that it's a lot more valuable for our clients to hear the actual examples and the actual projects that we've helped our clients with, and not just go through information that's either way on the website. So yeah, thanks again.
My pleasure.
Sure. So, okay, let's go through the next slide. And these are the services that we'll discuss today in more details. These are essentially the most popular services that we've been getting requests for. And these are consulting. Obviously, it's a very versatile service that covers a lot of aspects of any project development that fall outside of the scope of our support team. Then training, which is a great resource if you want to make sure your team gets up to speed on any new product or technology, instead of having them learn on their own pace and slowing down development. Then we'll talk about code and architecture review, which is a great resource to use if you've stumbled upon any issues with performers or lagging apps and are not able to resolve this internally. And then we'll go over to custom app development. And this is particularly valuable for clients of ours who don't have internal resources. We have clients who don't have any developer in-house, or maybe they have a few developers, but they're only proficient in particular technology, so they lack a certain expertise and need to outsource part of that development to us, or the entire app development. And we've done that multiple times. And then we'll go over to modernization and staff augmentation, which are essentially the focus of our webinar today, mainly because they're the most common scenarios that we've been seeing lately, and we felt that it will be most relevant and valuable for you to hear as well. Okay, so let's start with consulting. And consulting is really as I said, versatile. So it covers any type of help that you may need, which is not covered by our support team. As you know, Progress has a really vast, resource network. So we have a very extensive knowledge base, all sorts of online resources, the support team, the virtual classroom. So we've really made a big effort in making sure that you're as self-sufficient as possible. But still, very often clients find themselves either not having the time to go over that, or having a very specific use case where none of those resources are helpful to them, which is when they reach out to us to get additional help and consult them on how to resolve a particular challenge that they're trying to deal with. So this is really convenient for situations where you're trying to validate a particular development approach, where you want to make sure that your development is your app is built according to best practices, and that your team is working in a very time efficient and effort efficient way. And this is where our experts would come in and work along with your team. It's a very hands-on approach. The formats can vary depending on what your team is comfortable with. So we can do screen sharing sessions, or even emails or WebEx, GoToMeeting, whatever works for you. So it's very step-by-step guidance to help you overcome any roadblocks that you're dealing with to ensure that your development can continue to move as smoothly as possible. And I would actually give the word to Sean now, because he has a couple of examples here that he can share on a few consulting projects that we've recently delivered for clients.
Thanks, Simona.
Sean?
Yes. So yeah, I'm going to talk about just a couple quick examples in the consulting side. Just to add to what Simona said, you know, you're the experts with your application, but at times, if you've been working on an application and only on that application for a period of time, tunnel vision starts. So it makes sense to get another set of qualified eyes in there just for that purpose. The other good thing about consulting is it's, you know, these are short engagements generally, and you know, the cost savings is good. You don't have to hire a person, and you don't have to dedicate a resource if all you need are, you know, specific needs, guidance, architecture. You know, on architecture, that's one of the good examples. What we've been seeing lately, and this shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, but companies that are running Silverlight, and if you don't know, Silverlight is getting sunsetted, and there's a lot of scrambling going around trying to, you know, to change the technology behind these applications. So an example of a consulting engagement would be a proof of concept. You know, there's various options, Blazor being one of them, Angular being another, that are open. So we've been getting a lot of requests for help in that area recently. So that's a way that we can kind of, it's a very short engagement, it's high level. General POC is it depends, but you know, industry standards 4 to 8 weeks. But a good example of what we've been seeing recently and something that we can help you with.
Perfect. Thank you very much for sharing that, Sean. And now let's move on to training. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we have plenty of resources available for all of our clients, including online trainings in the virtual classroom. But very often those are not, how to say, efficient enough, especially with aggressive project schedules. So very often clients come to us when they're new to our products or to a particular technology, and they have an entire team that they want to bring up to speed quickly. So instead of just letting them go through the resources and learn on their own pace, when that may take a month or even longer, it's a great way to take this training and make sure that those teams are up to date and trained according to the best practices in a matter of a few days. It's also a good way to make sure that you're minimizing errors in the long run, because if they're not familiar with the tools and all of their specifics, there is a big risk, and we've seen that happen where they would go on the wrong path and come back to us after a couple of months on the wrong path, and then we have to fix that later on. So we always work with your team to tailor the agenda depending on your specific needs. So we don't really work with standard agendas. There's really no standard use case. Every case is unique in its own way. So we won't waste any time on topics that are not relevant for your team. We'll make sure to understand what you're using, what is your workflow, and we'll tailor the agenda based on that. And once we agree on the agenda, we can also be very flexible in the way that we deliver it. Sometimes, or actually in the majority of the cases, we deliver those in 2 or 3 full day sessions. But if you need your team to be able to still attend to their ongoing tasks, we can spread that around and maybe have 5 days and have 4-hour sessions each day, so that the team can still work on on their daily tasks in the meantime. Now, in terms of format, we usually deliver those both online and on-site. And now, obviously, due to COVID, no one is really traveling for business. So we're mainly sticking to the online format. But in the long run, it's good to know that we have the on-site option available as well. Some people really prefer to have, the tutor with them in the room to ask questions. But currently, this is more in the long-term planning. And again, Sean, I think you have an example here that you can share with our audience that's going to give them a better understanding of how the training can help their team.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, historically, training involves sending in an instructor. If it's customized, then, we would work on the curriculum along with the customer, develop it, and then we'd bring in an instructor, and at lunch, we'd bring in lunch, and, all the human interaction that we used to have, and hopefully we will again soon. But I'm going to give you an example of a company that started in that model and has continued to use their customized training and tailor it to COVID days. So it's a large customer, Fortune 500, who did a lot of hiring for a long period of time and continues to hire. So initially, we were tasked to create customized training for them because everyone's tech stack is different. Their needs are different. Some companies have senior people, some have all junior people. So it's this is a prescriptive engagement to actually establish and write the curriculum along with the exercises that you want to use. So we created this. They had numerous hiring occasions quarterly, basically. So we would also deliver the training on site with our instructor. While we were doing that, they had assigned a person who was going to be the instructor moving forward. So that person shadowed our instructor and then did some of the training himself, some of the instructing himself, and eventually took it over. So because they had this customized training specifically for their environment, they were able to repeat this process without our involvement. Now comes the part where we can't be in the same room. So, changing the model basically broke the training up into shorter segments, because it's been proven that about 4 hours is as much as people can take online training for and retain anything. So the model became a 4-hour session with breaks. And then after the session, we would have someone who is basically offering office hours. So there'd be an exercise. So you do an exercise based on what you've worked on during the day. That person would be available for questions for a certain period of time. And so the point being, once you do this, it's flexible and it's repeatable, and it's usually a really good investment. So that's an example of how customized training can be effective for you.
Indeed, yes, it's a great way to enable your team instead of just relying on external resources for longer periods of time. So, yeah, I agree. There's a great value to training from the very start. Wonderful. Okay, so let's move on to the next service, which is code review. And I would actually even put architecture review here because it falls in the same category. And this is a request that we've been getting from most commonly from long-term customers of ours who've been using our tools for quite a while. They have experienced dev teams in-house, but for some reason they have come across usually either a performance issue like lagging apps that they're not able to resolve on their own. It might be due to a recent upgrade or maybe a customization that they did recently, which is breaking their system. And even though they've spent some time analyzing that, they can't seem to understand what's causing that. And this is where they reach out to us for help. And we have really experienced developers and architects available who can come in and sit with your team and look at your code more closely and analyze your environment and determine what might be causing those performance issues. And usually, again, the format depends on what you prefer, but in most cases, we'll come up with lists of recommended steps that you need to take in order to resolve these performance issues. And we can just give you that list and have your developers execute those in-house. Or if you prefer, we can implement those changes ourselves, so we can provide you the full solution to those performance issues. And now let's talk a little bit about the custom app development service. Now, so this is a really great resource, as I mentioned at the beginning, for clients who don't have any developers in-house, or maybe just have a small team which is focused on a particular technology, but they still want to get a good app developed, and they reach out to us for help either just to fill in that particular technology knowledge that they lack, or just to outsource the entire app to us. And this is a great way for you to ensure that everything is built in a very how to say scalable and secure way, because just as a context, we currently work with 4 official service partners, which among them share about 200 people. So these are really experienced developers, designers, QAs, architects, most of which used to be part of the Telerik team back in the day. So a lot of those people are actually the people who built Kendo and a lot of the other components. So there is really virtually no better people to work on your app than the people who build them. So having them help you with that app development makes sure that you have a really robust, well-tested, well-optimized apps be built according to best practices, and you won't risk having any performance issues in the future. Then we move on to modernization. So this is really probably the most popular request that we've been getting lately. And that's, I guess, of no surprise because as we mentioned earlier, there are a lot of old or legacy frameworks which are about to be suspended, or at least, not supported anymore, like Silverlight or VB6. So a lot of our clients are in a situation where they need to migrate for them to new and more modern frameworks. So regardless of if you're moving from desktop to web or from web to mobile, or just need to modernize your user interface for your clients to stay up to speed with the latest trends, we have experts to help you in all of those scenarios. They've been delivering multiple projects lately for clients in the same situation. And it's a really great way to keep up to speed. Obviously, we're working in a very dynamic industry, and usually it's your clients who demand that. All of us are using multiple apps. We're even required to have that very intuitive, modern experience with all the systems that we use. So any company which is striving to stay up to speed is currently modernizing and is in a similar situation. So if you're dealing with similar issues at the moment, feel free to reach out, and we definitely can help during that process. And Sean, I believe you have an example here to share with our audience as well.
I do, and Simona, this is a lot of what we do at Resolute. The majority of the work that we do is modernization, with the focus being on the front end. We're one of these companies that does employ a number of former Telerik employees that were very high level. So in some cases, they were part of the creation of some of the products. So this is a focus of ours. But I'm going to start with one that goes back to the Open Edge days. And just to give you an example of how the services division of progress can really grow with a client. This particular client was a tire retailer, tires for cars. And they were an Open Edge client, long time Open Edge client, probably from the early 90s. So first we helped them go to a web app and, and got that step taken care of from a character app. But then they had a business problem. And their business problem was the business was going well, but what was happening is with a tire store, a lot of times you'd have to wait in the lobby and you'd have to wait for the salesperson, and there was a lot of waiting around, frustration on the client end. So what we did is we created a mobile app, and the mobile app enabled them to take their salespeople and get them out on the lot, walk with the customers to the car, take the information out, instead of having everyone wait in line. They were doing their work in the parking lot, getting all the information, and then coming back inside. So it dispersed the crowd, and there was an ROI that was tangible. So that there's a lot of history with progress services, starting with clients, even in the 80s in some cases, and still working today. So that's one example. The other, and modernization, it's almost necessary for everyone. If you haven't done it, a substantial modernization in 10 years, you're probably in trouble. Your competitors probably have, and there's going to be an issue at some point. And we're in the middle of a large modernization project right now, and that's exactly the case. Great company, great application, very, very functional. Been around for 30 years, so it looks like the late 90s, let's say. So we've been tasked to, this is a full scale modernization too, just to let you know, there are different, levels of modernization, but we're tasked to get them into technologies that, are strong now, that have been adopted by, companies that lead the industry. And what we're working with them on is to get their application to look much better than anyone else in their industry, which is law enforcement software. So there's a mobile aspect to this. Some of the functionality is the ability to collect data offline, and then when they get to a point where they can they have internet connection, they can download immediately. There's that. There's a complete reskinning of the application. There's using the latest web development tools, really changing the user experience for the better. Because there's two major things I think that fuel modernization right now. The first is keeping up with the Joneses. You either want to keep your market share or you want to take your competitors' market share. And by having an app that's slick, working, that's the performance is great on, and the usability is comfortable, you're going to gain a huge advantage there. And that also really has to do with the next generation of folks coming up, the millennials, because if you really want to see something funny, put a millennial in front of a character screen, because it will, it will look like nothing they've ever seen before. So companies are almost forced to give almost a mobile look and feel, just to accommodate this next generation because they have no tolerance for that, no experience with it, and they feel like they're walking with the dinosaurs. So this is a lot of what we do. Within the Progress ecosystem, and it's the methodology is pretty sound. We don't just start typing and coding. There's an assessment phase. It takes into consideration your technical environment, your business environment, your resource pool. A POC follows, which is a short engagement, like I said earlier, 4 to 8 weeks, that if the concept is proved, moves into the actual project. And in this case, the case of the one we're working on now, we're doing a lot of things. We have a UX person in there, we have an architect, we have senior and junior developers. It's a huge project, but in some cases, you just really need a reskinning. So you can bring in an expert in that area. Utilize your staff for the core coding, and just use a Progress Services person to use that function to look through that function. So if you're looking at this, I really recommend that you get in touch with Progress, because they really have partners like us, they have internal people, they have experts in this area, and that's a lot of what they do all day. So tough projects, modernization, but the reward is enormous.
Indeed, yes. Really, I think the majority of the projects that we are currently working on are modernization projects, regardless of if it's technology modernization or design modernization. But it seems that everyone is trying to stay up to speed and in line with the latest trends. People are really quickly getting used to a particular user experience, and they're demanding it. So everyone, I guess everyone is in the same boat now. So yeah, if you are having similar issues, feel free to reach out to us. We certainly can help you with in that path. Okay, so let's move on to the last service that we want to tell you about, and that's staff augmentation. So this is probably a less understood service, but it seems that a lot of clients are in such a situation and don't really know that they have this available for them. So this is staff augmentation is a great way to solve a temporary need without having to hire a full-time resource. And we're finding that a lot of our clients are in such a situation, or they've gone through the pain of hiring full-time resources, and they've wonder how to fill their time. So regardless of if you're struggling now with a particular project where you just need someone to come and join your team for 2 or 3 months to just cover a particular technology, maybe just a design or whatever you're lacking internally, or maybe you're up against a very aggressive deadline that you're not able to meet with the number of people that you have in-house, and you just need again, 1 or 2 people to join your team for several months so you can meet that deadline and then move on, then staff augmentation is a great way to resolve those cases. So essentially, we can assign whatever kind of experts you need. They will be working along with your team. They will operate as an extension of your team, and they will be doing that for as long as you need them to. We have, usually these are like 2 or 3 month projects, but we've had some of them run for more than 2 years, simply because the people are really experienced and they bring a lot of value, regardless of what your project's challenges are. Usually this is most common for long-term customers of ours who are like actively developing and are coming across these temporary challenges, and just reach out to us, get those people for a few months and go back to their standard workflow. So it's a very risk-free and flexible way of meeting those temporary needs. And again, Sean, I would invite you to share another example. I believe we have, either way, we're working on multiple projects like this, so there are plenty of examples.
Yeah, and the obvious advantage of this is the limited commitment that you make. You don't have to hire a full-time resource. You can pick a period of time, pick a period, a number of hours to add a resource. So usually this is used. This model is used when there's a deadline. Maybe a new customer signed by you, or you have a deadline if you're writing an internal app. that you've committed to upper management, and for one reason or another you're not hitting it. So we can come in as hired guns and help. But one example I have is a government project that we worked on at Progress Services, where there's a deadline. The system had to do with government airline tickets, and the fact that over $100 million a year was getting wasted in unused government airline tickets. So they needed a better system for it. And obviously, the people in charge of these projects, there's a general back there somewhere who is overseeing this. So they reached out to Progress, and Progress supplied, at one point, I believe it was a dozen developers to just get it done, and hit the deadline. System went out. So but again, it's generally it's a deadline situation, or you've lost somebody. Somebody retired, somebody moved on. It's a good stopgap for customers. And I just wanted to plug one more service, just because it's close to my heart. In the open edge world, Progress Services has fantastic DBAs, and some of the best in the world. And there's a managed service called Managed DBA, and what they do is they can basically be your remote DBA and do all the functions. It's a fraction of the cost of hiring someone. These people are hard to find in general. So that's another service that I highly recommend, and that I was involved in for many years.
Wonderful. Yep. Thanks again for sharing that, Sean. And indeed, staff augmentation actually has proven to be a very common request lately. I'm not sure if it's due to COVID. Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of companies are losing resources and just needs an external help to still meet their deadlines or to cover for a particular skill set. So we wanted to make sure that you're aware that we have these options available, all of the resources really. A lot of projects are facing multiple challenges, and we feel that not all of our clients are aware that we have these people available, and they're really experienced. So we wanted to make sure that you're comfortable and aware that whatever happens and whatever you come across during their development, even if you're perfectly in a very smooth situation now, but maybe in the future you come across a challenge that you can resolve internally, just to be aware that we have people to help you regardless of what that issue might be. And now, actually, we wanted to post the first question that we've prepared for the poll. As you know, and as I mentioned earlier, we're constantly trying to learn about the struggles that our clients are dealing with during their development. We want to be aware of that and want to plan ahead and make sure that we're focusing our time and efforts where they're most needed. So we wanted to ask you, and this is the first question, about what are the most common challenges that you are dealing with, whether that be bandwidth or deadlines or whatever you're struggling with the most. So we'll leave that on for 30 seconds so you can share your answers, and we'll leave that open for a while.
And obviously, since COVID, I'd assume that the budget issue is really a problem for almost everyone. A lot of budgets have been cut or just frozen. So we've been seeing a lot of that lately, and hopefully when we're able to get back to some kind of normalcy, that won't be as big an issue. But the only thing is with COVID, obviously more business needs to be transacted online rather than in person. So for some companies, the workload has gotten more. Unfortunately, it's a terrible reason to be busy and successful from a business perspective, but it's the reality that the need for automation and to be able to create systems that allow you to transact business remotely it's never been more than right now. That's really interesting, the results here. The lack of technical knowledge. I think that's that's something that being the biggest one, and obviously budget coming in second, but yeah, they're very interesting results. Um, the lack of technical knowledge is definitely something progress can help you with. I mean, it can be done quickly, it can be done immediately. So hopefully, going through these offerings, maybe there's something that you need help with that we've mentioned, and if we haven't mentioned it, please, ask a question about it. If there's a specific need, we could either get back to you during this presentation or after the presentation.
Indeed, yes. Yeah, I believe we closed the poll now, but we're certainly going to reach out to you afterwards and make sure that if there's a way for us to help you overcome these challenges, that we can provide that and make sure you're able to overcome those in the most effortless way possible. Okay, so let's move on actually, and I wanted to, just a second. Okay, so let's talk about the different phases of a particular of a typical services project. We felt that there's a lack of understanding of what happens after you reach out to us, so we wanted to shed some light on that, so you know what to expect, and you can plan for that and allow enough time for these several steps, so that you can make sure that we're able to provide the help that you need within the time frame that you expect that to happen. As the first step, regardless of whether you come to us through the support team or through the sales team or through the forum and the website, what we usually do as a start is we always set up a scoping call with one of the technical teams, like Resolute, for example. And the goal of this scoping call is to get a better understanding of your needs. And your requirements. So what you've been working on until now, what are the areas that you've been struggling with that you need our help, and what is the ultimate goal of your project? This information really allows us, and more specifically the technical team, to come up with an action plan of how to help you and how to deliver the work that you need in a way that's going to bring you the most value. And along with that action plan, they'll also propose a time frame and a cost, like an hourly rate, within which they believe they will be able to deliver that work to you. And from there on, we can again sit with your team and discuss that. So this is step 3 on the slide that you're seeing. So this is where we'll sit again and discuss this proposed action plan, see if it aligns with your expectations, maybe do some adjustments to it in a way that will better reflect your internal priorities. So maybe we can divide the project in different phases and first focus on particular aspects of the projects and then move on to the others. So we can do these adjustments in the time frame as well. And once we agree on that, then we'll move on to the next step, where we'll be able to sign the statement of work. And the statement of work is really a simple document which outlines the services that we'll be delivering to you, and within what time frame. And from that point on, we will just assign the developers to your projects, and they'll start working on it. So we wanted to let you know that these phases need to take place because we've had requests from clients that need us to start in a matter of a couple of days, and that's almost impossible. Although we have managed to go through all of these steps. Actually, I should say we've managed to go through all the first 4, because the 5th step is more of an ongoing phase. But we've managed to go through the first 4 steps in a matter of 3 or 4 days in really urgent cases where the clients really need to get our help in a matter of a few days. But realistically, these 4 steps usually take anywhere between 2 to 6 weeks. And the main reasons for this are the scoping phase and the legal phase. So very often, especially if it's a very complex project, apart from the first scoping call, we may need to do a second, more technical screen sharing session where you show the technical team your environment, what are the issues that you've been struggling with. Then it takes some time to put together that action plan. And also the legal phase sometimes takes a bit longer than expected. So just be aware of that if you're currently planning to reach out to us, or if you come across a situation in the future where you might need your help, just be aware that it may take anywhere between 2 to 5 weeks. And then obviously from there on, the ongoing support is where you have this constant sync ups with the technical team and with us to make sure that everything is going according to plan. If there are any new requirements or deliverables that you need to add to their work, that we can plan for those ahead of time. So it's just essentially a constant syncing, making sure that things are aligned with your expectations. And then I wanted to just spend a little bit of time to tell you about the tools that we use to provide you like the transparency and the control that you need in order to feel comfortable during the delivery phase. So after we sign and we start working on the project, we wanted to make sure that you are aware at all times on what work is being delivered for your project. So one way through which we are doing that is a system called Easy Track. And this is where the developers that are working on your project will be logging their hours at the end of each week. So you have access to this system, and you'll be able to see every week how many hours have been delivered on your project, what exactly the developers were working on, and then you can either approve or reject those hours. So at the end of each month, we'll essentially only bill you for the hours that have been logged and approved by you in Easy Track. So we believe that this really provides you a good control and transparency. It's a time and materials basis work. You're never going to be billed for anything which has not been delivered, and you have the right to, obviously either change direction or discontinue if you're satisfied with the work, or if you've decided to take on a different approach. Then another way through which you can have control over what's being done is through these weekly sync-ups. And this is really decided between you and the technical team. They're really flexible, so whatever works for your team is usually fine with them as well. It can be daily emails or weekly screen sharing sessions. Whatever fits within your team's workflow is fine with them. So obviously, if you have any other format of working, they're usually open to that as well. So we can discuss that, and we want to make sure that you're comfortable at all times during the delivery. Great. So actually, here we have a second question that we wanted to ask you about, and this is focused more on your particular scenario. So the project you're currently struggling with, and in context of the services we just discussed, where do you think you would be getting the most value? So you should be seeing that question on your screen already. And again, we'll leave it open for 30 or 40 seconds, so you can put in your answers. It's a multiple answer question actually, so anything that you feel is relevant, you can mark it.
There's a bit of overlap here, obviously with consulting modernization, but just answer to the best of your ability. Looks like right now there's a very close horse race going on, which is interesting. But yeah, and then I expected that modernization would be one of them, just because the whole topic of digital transformation modernization is on the tip of everyone's tongue. So just got a couple more seconds here to roll in some more results. Okay. Huh. Interesting. We'll show this to you in a minute, and then we'll get into QA. And if we don't have time to answer your question, we will definitely get back to you. And if you'd like us to set up a conversation later, please contact Simona.
Great. I think Yeah, I think we're done. And thank you very much for putting in your answers. They really provide us good insight into what you're struggling with. Um, yeah, it's an interesting. Obviously, modernization is a common one, but yeah, custom app development and consulting are also pretty popular. We'll dig into that. Okay, so let's move on to the Q&As now. I'm guessing you've been, I haven't kept an eye on the chat box, but I know my colleague Stefan has been keeping an eye on it. So if there are any interesting questions that we can answer now, we have about 10 minutes left. We can go over that. I'm sure it will be interesting for the entire audience. And if we don't manage to go through all of them, now we'll make sure to reach out to you after the webinar and set up separate calls. So I see there's a question related to whether we only cover the Telerik tools or broader technologies. So do we only do projects related to our tools, or maybe if clients are having challenges with other technologies which might not necessarily include our tools, whether that's something we can cover? And the answer is yes. So we are not insisting on you using our tools. In order to be successful, we want to make sure that whatever you're working on, that there is usually a best way to resolve that. And even if that doesn't include the Telerik tools, we'll be happy to work with you. And we've done actually many projects like that in the past. So that's not a limitation that you need to be aware of.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll take another one here. Real simple. Will it be a recording? Absolutely, and it'll be sent to you. There's also a fairly intricate question about Telerik progress controls and a memory leak issue, and that's definitely something we can address. So whoever's asked that question, please get in touch with Simona, and we'll answer promptly. Okay.
And folks, this is Stefan. I've been answering some of those questions online, but just one of the questions that came up was around a legacy web forms application, and people were asking whether they should be considering a modern JavaScript framework for that, or explore Blazor, and is that like an approach or consulting that we can help with?
Yeah, that's interesting, because that's a lot of what we're doing these days. And I think the answer to that is it depends. It really depends on the rest of your technology. It depends on your application. It depends on your goals. But like I said, yeah, there's a lot of what we've been doing these days is assessing that situation, JavaScript versus Blazor. And Blazor, Blazor is coming along quickly. That's still very young technology. So, someone that's been doing this for a while, I take pause a little bit, but there's nothing that says that it's not going to be a very powerful tool. But again, it's something that we have to discuss. I mean, you can, and really talk through the details of what you're trying to do, where you're trying to be, what's your skill set internally. There's a lot of things to answer, but yeah, that's been a topic of conversation we've all been dealing with a lot. So we'd love to get into that with you.
Yeah, indeed. Actually, we've been seeing a lot of requests for Blazor, especially in the last few months. So I'm guessing it's really coming up and becoming more and more popular. And Resolute in particular have been working on a couple of these projects. So we certainly have the expertise to help you if you're considering moving on to Blazor. And then another question which I'm seeing is whether there's a minimum of time required for a particular project in order to sign, and that's a tricky one. To be honest, most of the teams that we are working with would generally be looking into projects that are at least a week or two of engagement, simply because there are a lot of calls and paperwork, as we just mentioned, that go into one. So it needs to be justified for them from an efforts perspective. We have had some requests for smaller engagements, like 10 or 15 hours of consulting, and we are working with a couple of freelancers that are able to cover that. But just be aware that in the majority of the cases, in order for a project to make sense and to be workable and constructive for you, it would probably require at least a week or two of work so that we can get into an actual discussion. But we are flexible and we're trying to make it work even for smaller engagements.
No, I can't see what's been answered, so excuse me if this has already been dealt with on the chat window. But somebody asked about IP and proprietary information. Before we get into this relationship, there's a mutual document signed that covers that. It protects you, it protects us. So yeah, that is obviously a topic on everyone's mind these days, protecting your IP. And so when we get into a project, first of all, there's an NDA. Second of all, there's some a lot of language about protecting intellectual property, and it's mutual. So that's a good question. So I just wanted to hit that if Stefan had not done that in the chat.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. And I was just typing a response. I think that's better probably discussed in a conversation. I'll reach out to the person that asked that question, because it really depends on what the enhancements are. Some of those that are related to our UI components, typically there's certain protections in the license agreement around obviously new features that we want to roll out at some point. And we do also have a service called roadmap prioritization, which allows our product teams to basically escalate certain features on top of what we are already doing in terms of roadmap planning. So this is probably better discussed in a quick conversation, just to understand what exactly the requirements may be. But I'm just typing back a response now.
Yes, indeed. Just to add on to that, if you have a project and you have a requirement for a particular functionality that you want to be part of the product and also be supported with the future releases, then this is something that would need to be delivered by our product team internally. And this is what Stefan was referring to. It's the feature acceleration program. That's a bit more tricky because obviously the internal product teams are working on a really ambitious roadmaps, and they have a really aggressive release schedule. So it's a little bit more challenging to allocate one or two people of the internal team to work on a client functionality. But if it's a well-voted one, there is a voting where the most popular functionalities get on the roadmap. If it makes sense for us to work on that, and if they're able to allocate those resources, we can make this work, but this will be delivered internally and not through our service partners. So just be aware that it might be a bit more challenging from a planning perspective. And I see we have a couple of more minutes left. Not sure if we have more questions to go over, but again, if you can't think of a question right now but are still dealing with an issue currently that you want to learn more about, or at least see what options you have available, make sure to reach out to us after the webinar. We'll be sending you the recording, and we'll be happy to discuss any challenges that you're struggling with and help you find a solution for those. Let's see if there's anything else on the chat.
I'll just partially answer something that was already talked about. Someone asked how much is modernization. We're not avoiding the answer. It's just that modernization comes in so many shapes and sizes. What I will say is generally you need to start with an assessment. That assessment can be anywhere from 80 to 160 hours in most cases. After that is a POC if you want to keep moving, and that is generally a 4 to 8 week project. At that point, everything's really variable, because apps are different sizes and shapes, and your modernization may just be around some skinning rather than a full scale modernization. But at least you have an idea that's the first 2 steps that are recommended.
Yeah, and the rates also really vary greatly depending on the seniority of the people that you need to get involved on your project. So that's why there's no set rate. Some projects can easily be delivered by a mid-level developer. Others require architects to come in or really experienced designers, either to build an entire design system or maybe to go and analyze a more complicated app and figure out what's causing any optimization issues. So there's no clear answer to that. It really varies greatly depending on your challenge. Okay, so we're actually at the top of the hour. I'm not sure if there are any other questions in the chat, but we'll review those afterwards, and we'll make sure to reach out to you in case we haven't addressed your question now during the webinar. I really hope that this was informative and valuable for you to hear. We feel that there hasn't been enough awareness of what the services part of our business provides. So we wanted to make sure that you know that this is like a safety net that is there for you at all times, regardless of what projects you're working on, what challenges you're coming across. And even if you have very experienced teams in-house, we are always there to help you overcome any issues that might be slowing down your development. Feel free to reach out at any time if you need our help or assistance with anything. We'll send you the recording and we'll follow up with all of those that put in questions, but we weren't able to cover them now during the time. And Sean, again, I would like to thank you once more for taking the time to join us today. I really think that the examples that you provided were very valuable to our audience and really allow them to make a more, I'd say, to have a more relatable examples to see how they're maybe the situation that they're currently in and they've been struggling for a while can have an easy solution, or at least easier than they thought. So thank you again. Great.
Yes, thank you for the time.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for joining us. We'll follow up with the recording, and if there's anything, we'll always be here. So reach out to us, and we can set up discussions to help your projects. Have a great day. Talk to you. Bye.